Hello and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Lori Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome my wonderful guest, Cathy Caswell. I'd like to tell you a little bit about her. Cathy Caswell enjoyed a corporate career in the food industry, so she certainly understands what's involved in juggling important parts of life like work, family, and community. She also knows how stressful patterns can get in the way of living and what's important to you, and often without even being aware sometimes of what we're going through or why. She was introduced to a model, which we'll be talking a bit about today, called Logosynthesis. It's a model of change that she was using that helped her finally realize immediate and sustainable changes in her life. And so she became trained in this model and is now a certified Master Practitioner and Instructor in Logosynthesis, and she guides others to use this simple and powerful model. Cathy also created the Healthy Living Plan, which she shares her personal experiences and professional training in everyday language to help others become empowered and unlock their potential to live more fully. So welcome, Cathy.
Thank you, Lori. It's so exciting to be here. I love your work, and I love the opportunity to talk to you about logosynthesis and wellness and healthy living and healing from the heart.
Oh, it's so wonderful. And, just to let everyone know, I actually have known you for several years through the Logosynthesis community, as co-students, as mentor, as guide. You've really helped me understand a lot more by reading your books and working with you personally. And also, even though I feel like I know you so well, we haven't actually met in person, which is probably the case for a lot of people in the last few years.
Yeah, I was just at the Logosynthesis summer conference in Italy last week, and there were so many people there that I hadn't met in person, but we've worked so much together over Zoom since the pandemic, especially. Yeah. And it really felt like I already knew them. So I do look forward to the day we meet in person.
Yes, thank you for that. And is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience before we go into the topics of intuition and helpers, healers, and guides from the heart and healing tips?
I think you covered it really well. I guess the only thing I would say is when I was introduced to logosynthesis, I didn't really have any issues that I had to work on, right? Like I was fine. I was busy and doing well. And the only thing that I really noticed was that I was a little overreactive at times. But I was surrounded by a whole bunch of successful people that also were a little overreactive at times. So we were all okay. So we weren't really looking for something to change our lives around or anything. So in some ways, that's a little different perspective than a lot of people who come to healing work, right? Because a lot of people come to healing work looking from a position where they're really struggling or suffering and aware of that.
Yeah. And not always, but sometimes people wind up getting in trouble with others. And they think they're fine, and they may well be. It's the world that's the problem. And so it's not always that someone is self-initiating care. Sometimes people come to look for answers because the other people in their life are having problems.
Exactly.
So they want to try to fix that guy over there.
Yeah.
But if you could just help people understand the basics of what logosynthesis is, that might be a new term for people, and they may not understand what we're talking about yet.
Yeah, so logosynthesis is a really powerful therapeutic treatment modality, but it's also used internationally by executive coaches, by people that are interested in wellness and well-being. I was speaking last week with Daniela, who works with, organizing homes, but also organizing minds. And so there's a really wide variety of application, and where it comes down to is really recognizing how we suffer or what bothers us in our everyday lives, and then having a very precise and structured technique to guide us through the processes of identifying the underlying triggers, which is mental imagery or sensory perceptions. So it's the 95 or more % of the population has visual images. So if you think of the visual images that come to mind for you, those are the things we're talking about, using the power of words, very specific sentences, to shift the mental imagery. And when we shift the mental imagery, the emotional distress falls away. And it's really interesting because in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of research starting around mental imagery and emotional distress and how those are so closely linked. And it offers another approach to relieving distress rather than having to change the thoughts. And so that's where logosynthesis comes in for me.
Okay, so changing the thoughts is what most people know about through cognitive behavioral therapy or through coaching models, where you have goals and plans and you work towards changing maybe your belief structure towards being able to achieve things. So what you're talking about is a different kind of approach. Now, is a psychotherapy model or a coaching model? You said it's kind of widely used.
Yeah, so Willem's background was a clinical psychologist, a psychotherapist, so it's definitely a psychotherapeutic model, but it's so easy to use, and yet it goes so deep. It's based on spirituality, but it's also based on the psychotherapy, and it's something that offers us an in regardless of where we're coming from, regardless of what our background is. And the importance of working with someone that does have a background in guided change is being able to establish a trusting and strong working alliance, because sometimes when we touch on this mental imagery and this emotional distress, it can be quite intense. And so it's important that people are trained in the model to guide you through it, so that you feel safe and you know that you're being guided to a place that will offer relief. And a lot of people in the logosynthesis community are there to explore for their personal use, and they have wonderful results. And it can be used for self-coaching. We promote it for self-coaching, and yet there's a real value for deeper issues to actually work with someone who's trained in the model.
Great. You mentioned the name Willem, but maybe a little more explanation could help too. Who's Willem?
Who is Willem? Willem Lammers is the founder of Logosynthesis. He is Dutch with working in Switzerland for many years. And he's been working both as a psychotherapist and, with background in NLP and transactional analysis. And a lot of those models I don't have experience and background in, but he's worked with so many different models, and he also has a very strong spiritual knowledge, I guess. So he often talks about religion, because people come from all different religious or faith backgrounds to logosynthesis, and they find their place there because he works with the content as opposed to the kind of that dynamic of a religious institution. And so he works from that base to incorporate the knowledge and the recognition of our essence, that each of us as a human being is more than body and mind,
Yeah.
We are essence. And from that position, essence does not suffer. And yet all the things that happen in our world freezes our energy and triggers suffering. But the beauty of the model is once we start resolving this mental imagery, these beliefs and memories that are frozen in our personal space, and if we're talking beliefs and memories and mental imagery, all of this is energetic. So with your background in energy psychology, it's a beautiful fit, right? Because we're talking about feelings. People feel distressed, and feelings are energetic in nature. That is different than a cognitive thought. And what we often notice is people try to think their way through a problem and think they know what that triggering mental imagery is. And yet it's often something that's residing deeper, that's more hidden. And the structured technique that Willem developed to resolve this mental imagery allows the person to contact that triggering mental imagery that's often hidden. And so it's energy work. It's about energy being in the right place. So energy that doesn't belong to you shouldn't be in your personal space. So, there's a couple core principles behind logosynthesis that people could find online. And I highly recommend reading his book, Discover Logosynthesis, because it follows a very simple and guided way so that people can start working with it right away and understand the basics. There's so much to the model, but yet you can start working just with the basics. And that little book, Discovered Logosynthesis, is a beautiful place to start.
Yeah, especially if you're working on everyday problems. If you're working with something deeper that's been more long-standing or has deeper roots, it's important to be with a trusted other who's trained to help you so that you don't have to do it alone and get further stuck.
Right.
But I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about this notion of essence, because this is about healing tips from the heart, and often that is connected to essence for people. Not everyone has guides, but most people have helpers in some form or fashion. And so I'm wondering if there's any healing tips about essence that you might share with us, maybe from your personal life or things that you've observed in your working life.
Yeah, and I guess for me, just the notion, because if we talk in essence in my circles, it's not something that we would talk about regularly, right? It's what is essence, and it sounds a little esoteric sometimes. But what the basis is that we're all human. We all have this powerful spirit that we come into this world with. That's essence. And essence, Willem talks about it from the position of ourselves as essence, understanding essence in the form of God or Allah, like regardless what our religious affiliation is. For centuries and centuries, people have recognized that there's a greater power, and we are part of that greater power. And the beautiful thing for me is with the logosynthesis model, and it comes up so clearly in the work, is that we all are essence, and we all have a purpose to be here in this life. And what ends up happening is that we adopt these beliefs from our culture. We end up having experiences that kind of shut us down, and we think, oh my goodness, it's the things like in my life. I always say I grew up on a busy dairy farm. It was a lot of working hard and hurry up and get things done, and that served me really well. But sometimes that kind of blocks you off and keeps you stuck in a doing mode. And when you peel it away, you get back in contact with your essence, as opposed to having to, develop all these goals to become something more than what you are now. It's a flip. It's resolving the blocks that get in the way of expressing who you are. And to me, that's really quite beautiful, because we don't have to do anything to be more. We can have some compassion to recognize what's getting in the way of being who we really are. And so from a healing standpoint, to me, that that kind of changes the formula a little bit.
It flips it completely. They say human doing versus human being, and that we spend more time doing than being.
Yeah.
Not valuing the being because you can't see the results in a certain way sometimes, or feel it, or we get programmed to produce. And so that beingness it's elusive, but it's also so basic. If
And
you
it's
watch,
something we,
yeah.
yeah, it's something we pick up in society as well. And I was reading the book by Ian McGilchrist, The Matter of Things, The Matter with Things. And it's about the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. It's all about neuroscience and psychiatry. But what he observes is that our world is very left brain focused.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge with that is that the left brain is about intellect and the
Mm-hmm.
right hemisphere is about intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And when we place so much focus on intellect, which we do in our society,
Mm-hmm.
we end up losing contact with the intuition, and the intuition sees things as a whole. The intellect puts things together in parts.
Yeah.
And his observation is that we need to shift society back to become more balanced, that we put more emphasis back into the right hemisphere and that
Mm-hmm.
holistic thinking, that intuitive being. And then his dilemma is, how do we do this? And to me, just with the work with logosynthesis, what I've done personally and what I see in working with others is, as you resolve those blocks, the
Mm-hmm.
beliefs, the memories, the fantasies about what could go wrong if we don't, if we don't do all the things that we should be doing, when we start to shift that energy, we automatically come in contact with more of our right hemisphere intuitive being and with our essence. And so it's when you think healing from the heart, that's where your heart is, right? Like,
Yeah, I love that you're bringing in that part about the heart, and it's so true what you're saying about the brain science. And when I teach on this topic, I make sure that I talk about the whole body, because our bodies respond first, and then the brain is kind of the last slow one, especially the left brain. And it's more limited, like we honor it, but it's more limited, and in terms of the data it can process and all the rest. So coming from the heart drops you down into a different kind of a truth, and your gut, if you can go there too. They call the second brain. But I'm wondering how you and I have spoken quite a bit about intuition over the years. And I know maybe I'm not revealing too much to say that you have different ways of looking at intuition, maybe than some people. So how does intuition figure in your life, and in the way that you work with people, if at all?
Yeah. And I guess there, if I, just in light of the conversation we just had on the left and right hemisphere, is I was very much operating, in the corporate environment, and in everyday life was very much focused on that intellect. And so intuition didn't really kick in for me that much, right? I know it was there. And for me, with my faith, it's always been a very personal matter for me. And so I connect deeply with my faith. And I guess what ended up happening is, as you start to notice in my life that I was kind of overreacting at times, and you start to search out for some solutions. So I did the yoga, and I did the meditation and the Reiki, and a lot of things to connect me from an energy perspective. But in some ways, I think I was just so disjointed, or so out of tune with my body, that it didn't really have a whole lot of meaning. And then when I met Willem, I wasn't looking for any healing piece, but there was something that said, pay attention. And I always say he reminded me of my uncles that were priests. And my uncles used to always get us, challenge your beliefs, challenge your beliefs. And so I connected with it, I guess, through my faith and through my kind of family connection, to pause and say there's something here. And I mean, the material really resonated with me, that there's something that's causing me to act or react in a way that I don't like. And then it was actually just peeling away the layers, right? What am I reacting to in my life? So what are those times that I'm, speaking in a tone of voice, or what are the times when my jaw is clenched, and noticing that and applying logosynthesis. And then I started to notice shifts. So for me, with yoga and meditation and that, I don't know if it was, I think it all helped for me. It helped me to get me to a point where I was open to explore something else. But with the logosynthesis, I really found that, just resolving those energetic triggers, that mental imagery, just opened up space that led to another layer.
Beautiful.
And yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that part of your story. I hadn't actually heard you put it together that way before.
Probably because I haven't, Lori.
The magic of a podcast. Spending the time into being, slowing down, focusing. So that's cool. So there's a new piece that's coming in together for you, even in this moment.
Yeah. And last week, again, at the summer conference, it was a week of intense work, and intuition was a big part of it for me, because, as you know, I keep saying I'm not intuitive, and yet I know I am very intuitive with this work. And I really came to a point last week of just settling in to say, maybe I don't get the same mental imagery. Maybe I don't see it the way, most people because I have a perception that people that are intuitives are more psychic, they have more psychic ability. And I just came to realization last week that I can trust my intuition, I can trust my gut, I can trust what's there. But it's taken me a long time to get here. Well, and it's not at the same level as many people, right? Like, it's different, but I can still trust it.
I think you're really speaking to a lot of our listeners and viewers who think, oh, I'm interested in intuition, but I'm not intuitive. Other people are. And what I often tell people is, we usually undervalue what's natural to us and overvalue what is not. So we see, oh, I want that so-and-so has, because they're really good at whatever, seeing things. Unless you see the auric field and the chakra colors swirling around, then you're not real, in terms of intuition. And it's not that at all. I think that I've always thought that you're highly intuitive. And I would imagine that if you looked at a different lens at raising animals and being on a farm, that you would notice uncanny synchronicities and messages coming through that are not logical or language-based, that are not in 3D reality, but are vital for the survival of the farm, the family, and the animals.
Yeah.
Like knowing when a baby's being born, or watching out for a storm that wasn't predicted, or who knows, catching an accident that would have been really bad. And I can feel your mind is clicking into yes, 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 yes. And so,
if you put it that way.
Right. And so it's an expanded definition. And since we take those things for granted, we often don't label them or notice them. This is what I teach people about this when I'm teaching intuition classes. So if you look at it that way, I love the language that you used about logosynthesis when you said you heard to pay attention to this. So that's an auditory information. Now, it may not have been like a voice, like our voices now, but there was some sort of an auditory experience of listening that you paid attention to. And that's the key with intuition, is to pay attention and follow through. And so I love that you're opening up to all this from the conference. And
well, I think it's a whole slew of things, right? Like, it's been a progression, but
So through that example, I think maybe people will go, oh, aha, I have this too. Oh yeah, I remember. So if you stop thinking about the label intuition, and you start thinking about happenstance, synchronicity,
Hmm.
timing, a sense of knowing without knowing how or why, then the definition kind of opens up to more possibility. And then I
Yeah.
think people start to realize that this is a very natural survival kind of instinct, and the one that you can grow if you're interested in
Yeah, and I think
expanding
that
it.
growing piece is huge, right? Because, and I think logosynthesis offers a wonderful model to grow it, because I still go back to, that intellect versus intuitiveness and what we
Mhm.
value in society. Because even on the farm, a lot of times it's go, go, go. And yes, you're intuitive, but you don't really value that side of it, or you don't necessarily, right? You're so focused on the doing
Well, it's
rather than,
practical. You
right?
don't stop and
Yeah,
think like, why did
survival.
yeah, how did I know like to, secure that ladder as I walked out the door, rushing to do whatever? You're not going to reflect on it. But it's
Yeah.
there. It's kind of flowing around you in a very natural sort of way, probably. But
Hmm.
I'm wondering, are there challenges or obstacles? And you talked about the anger that you thought was just kind of, normal because everybody was angry at work. But aside from that, you didn't have problems really. But are there obstacles or challenges that you have worked through? Maybe with with helpers, healers, or guides?
Yeah, and part of this work is doing an awful lot of a large amount of our own personal work to become a practitioner, to become a master practitioner. The
Mhm.
focus is on your own personal growth, your healing and personal growth. And so I've worked through a lot of issues, and there are a lot of themes that come up in the work. And so yesterday I was working on in a practice group. And, one of the obstacles to create a new business is who's your target audience. And so
Mhm.
I'm there, well, and everybody says pick the audience that you know. So it's these successful working moms, right? And so it's okay, but really who I want to attract are the leaders, the gatekeepers who can kind of do the work to make things in the workplace feel that much more relaxed and productive. And so when I did the piece of work, what ended up coming up is, why is this so important to me? It
Mm.
came back, I was celiac as a child, and I wasn't diagnosed until I was 20. And I had a lot of energy stuck in that recognition that I suffered for 20 years and nobody in the medical system knew about celiac disease. And as I connected to it, it was not that nobody knew, but that there was knowledge in the medical system, but it wasn't getting out to where it should be, or where it
Mhm.
could be at the field level, so the doctor didn't have it. And then what came up for me was, how this is relevant to logosynthesis. And I've been kind of doing some literature reviews on and just looking at the research in PubMed
Mhm.
about mental imagery and emotional distress. And when I put
Mhm.
in logosynthesis, there's nothing on logosynthesis
Yet.
yet in
Mhm.
this whole library of the medical field.
Right.
And so, when I look back to when I was diagnosed with celiac disease, there was one little paragraph in a book. I was studying dietetics at the time, one
Mhm.
little paragraph on celiac disease. And I think it even at that point came up in PubMed. But so there's an element there of kind of recognizing where energy is blocked, and kind
Mhm.
of creating that path forward. So my little aha moment is like, okay, so maybe my work is more to create a space in the medical system, and so it's to trust that and know what steps to take to move forward and feel confident with it.
Wow. I didn't realize that about your past. I have a history in my family and myself with allergies, asthma,
Hmm.
and eczema. And so I can relate to the body kind of attacking itself from
Yeah.
things that should be quote unquote natural. Like, why would eating a peach cause your tongue to swell? Like, peaches are good for you.
Yeah.
So, and then, wondering about all of that and not having access to the information. A lot of times innovations are created, but the word doesn't get out sometimes for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
Um,
And for me, I mean, when I was diagnosed with celiac, it was like, I suffered for 20 years and all I had to do is not eat gluten. And so then fast forward to meeting Willem, and it's like, okay, so we take these mental images and shift them using a very structured process, and the distress is resolved. How does nobody know this?
yeah, it's like you want to shout it from the rooftops. Hey, folks, step right up, get rid of your suffering, and walk out happier.
Exactly.
Yeah, but as you said, Cathy, like not everything is for everyone. Somebody
Yep,
else might be like, oh, yoga's
exactly.
my thing, or Reiki. So it's a process. And I'm so grateful
Exactly.
that you have found Logosynthesis helpful for you. I have also found it incredibly helpful, which is why I became a certified practitioner and instructor. But I think that it fits into a tapestry or mosaic for
Yes,
people. So
100%.
yeah, and so people will find what they need
Mm-hmm.
along the way, but there's definitely something here. Oh, I'm so glad that you shared these stories and that you're on your own personal healing journey continuing, as we all are. It's so exciting. I'm excited to see like what happens in the next 6 months or a year with you. But we're coming to the end of our time together, and I'm wondering, is there anything else you'd like to share that we haven't talked about so far?
I don't know. I think we covered a lot. I guess my only thing is to encourage people that, yeah, like these these issues that can feel so intense and so chronic and
Mm-hmm.
and so debilitating, there is hope that, with work and with kind of reconnection and finding the right resources, there is hope to move forward in a better position and from a more open heart and
Mm-hmm.
just trust the process, trust that people are there to help you to find the way. But I encourage people to really take ownership for their own health and well-being and find the resources that they need to help them feel better
Yeah,
and live their purpose, right?
yeah, it's such a combination of relying on yourself for initiative and saying, recognizing you have a problem, like that you're angry at work or whatever it is. Um, but then also knowing that you're not alone
Yes.
and that there is help, and that the help can be reading something that opens the door to something new, or meeting someone, having a conversation, listening to a podcast, or a spiritual realm of help too, whether it's essence or guides or angels or God or whatever it is. So,
Yes.
and then going into the heart. So thank you so much for that. And
Yeah.
if people want to find out more about you and get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah. So I have a website, cathycaswell.com, for like an author website, and then also the Healthy Living Plan. I put a lot of information, a blog, and that,
Mm-hmm.
and you can Google the Healthy Living Plan for like a podcast, and a lot of resources available. So my goal is to make it more accessible, and I encourage people to join the Facebook group called Logosynthesis. It's a great place to go if you're interested in finding more about the model itself. And it is one model that combines with a lot, like very integrative, to work with the other treatment and healing modalities. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I encourage curiosity and exploring.
Yes, and thank you. I'll have links to the various sites and some of the topics we've talked about so people can learn more. And I also want to thank you for interviewing me on your podcast. So that was a
Yes.
great experience that I really enjoyed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so for anybody that's interested in that one, it's under Why Logosynthesis Works, and you talk about self-care for the healing professionals, which
Yeah.
is so important,
Yeah.
especially now because there's so much going on in the world.
Yeah. And we all need help.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're in it together.
Yes. Thank you so much, Cathy. It's always a delight to spend time with you.
Likewise. Thank you, Lori.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.